Speaker.
Mr.
Speaker, that minister was talking about another member in this House being dull, and I actually think that that minister needs to go back and re-watch his speech to get the true definition of dull, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to concentrate today on the issues that we have with emergency accommodation and with WIN's debt. But to set the scene, I just want to point out how out of touch that national government is by touching on some of the statements they've made around housing. John Key says, if you're homeless, go to Work and Income New Zealand. They're going to resolve all the problems. Nick Smith says, homelessness is a figment of their imagination. And Paula Bennett says, get out of Auckland. That's the answer. We can't fix it here, so we'll pay you to get out. Mr. Speaker, that goes to show that actually they have no plan for the housing crisis that we're facing, and they have no plans to address the homelessness that we have in Auckland or any part of the country. Mr. Speaker, I think that that side of the House have underestimated how much Middle New Zealand actually cares about this issue. Mr. Speaker, it's clear that it is the most vulnerable New Zealanders that are in this situation, but every day Middle New Zealanders, the ones that they are chasing votes from, are confronted with this issue. They're confronted with this issue because there are 305,000 children living in poverty, and some of those Middle New Zealand children are attending school with them. They're confronted with this issue, Mr. Speaker, because some of those parks that Middle New Zealand goes to visit early in the morning have cars in them with people sleeping in them, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, they are confronted with this issue because every day they go to their shopping centres, every day they go to the mall, they see people begging outside, they see homelessness. It does affect them, Mr. Speaker, and that side of the House have underestimated to what extent. Mr. Speaker, I got some numbers back recently that showed debt for Work and Income New Zealand clients has gone from $377 million in 2011 to $417 million now, Mr. Speaker. Our most poorest New Zealanders are being thrown into debt by Work and Income New Zealand, and we know that a large chunk of that debt is because of emergency accommodation. Unfortunately, despite the fact that the ministry can do this, the minister and the ministry refused to pull that information apart so we can find out exactly how much the government have had to spend on emergency accommodation, at least in the last 2 years. They say they are not willing to commit the resource and the time to collating that information. Well, actually, Mr. Speaker, this is a matter of public interest. This story has been running on Radio New Zealand and other forms of media for the last 3 weeks at least, non-stop, consistently, and it will not stop because there is public interest in this, Mr. Speaker. It's disappointing when we see in an Official Information Act request that I have here, received in January, that government was made aware of the incoherency with respect to emergency accommodation back in September last year. They were told that they needed a plan, Mr. Speaker. They were made aware of it, and since then they have done nothing. It is only now that it has come to public light that they are starting to act on it. Meanwhile, what we've seen is increasing numbers of New Zealanders showing up to our electorate offices, homeless, having gone to Work and Income New Zealand, seeking emergency accommodation. And what do they get, Mr. Speaker? They get told there are no social housing places, there is no state housing for you, but we will put you in a motel. Unfortunately, you will have to pay it back. One of the cases, it is stupid, Derek Ball, and one of the cases that I've seen recently, a couple with 4 children now owe $26,000 to Work and Income New Zealand, and a big chunk of that is because of the motel accommodation that they've been put in. For 2 months, Mr. Speaker, 2 months they have been in motel accommodation. Mr. Speaker, another family that I had come into our office, $45,000 in debt to Work and Income New Zealand. And Mr. Speaker, when they were told that their only option in terms of accommodation was going to be motel accommodation, they said they would rather sleep in their car with their children. That government should be ashamed of themselves, Mr. Speaker. We're hoping for some big announcement around emergency housing tomorrow, but unfortunately all we think we're going to get are more pitiful announcements like Paula Bennett's admission of defeat that people should be paid $5,000 to get out of Auckland because they have no plan to solve the housing crisis.
Good speech.